welcome to the Reading FC Community Trust Bitesize Podcast, brought to you by the Primary Stars team, where we speak to practitioners from the education and football world and discuss ways we can have a positive impact on the primary PE landscape. Today we welcome Mark Rivers, who's a senior counter coach developer for the FA, who will be talking to us about the value of CPD. So welcome, Mark.
Hi, how you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. Yourself?
Pretty good, thank you. Yeah.
Excellent. Good. Thanks very much for joining us. Appreciate your time. Looking forward to a good discussion.
Yeah.
Cool. So we'll jump straight in. Basically, the idea of this is just to give everyone a little bit of an idea of something that might be able to benefit them just in their sort of day-to-day practice, whether they be a teacher, a coach, or anyone working sort of within education. So first of all, it'd be great to sort of hear a little bit from yourself about what your role is and sort of what your day-to-day at least used to or hopefully will look like.
Yeah, it's well, currently I'm a county coach developer, which is quite a posh title, but it means that I work through Barks and Bucks. There's probably about 45 of us that work or connected with different county FAs throughout the country, and it's probably exactly what it says on the tin, really, developing coaches within that county. And it might be in the form of sort of more formal coach education, such as like your level 1s, your level 2s, your UEFA B. So anyone that comes on that, yourself, you've been on our UEFA B pretty recently, so I'll help sort of deliver that. But in addition to that, it's sort of going out to clubs, going out to the environment of the coaches and offering support there where I can. And also it might be CPD events that we're going to talk about today. So it might be something that's bespoke to your club that you look through and say, do you know what, I think we need a little bit of assistance here. Then someone like myself will come out and offer some support.
Fantastic. No, thanks for that. It's really, really good. Like I say, I've been the recipient of some CPD from yourself in the form of the UEFA B, which was fantastic. So it'd be great to hear your thoughts.
Yeah.
A nice general open question for you to start with. For you, what does good quality CPD entail? So this you can look at this both ways. So this is as a practitioner delivering it, or potentially as a participant yourself. What would you look for or look to do?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think if we look back at the sort of fairly recent restructure of the courses, I quite like the idea of someone coming out to my environment where I'm working. Unfortunately, I'm a bit older than you, and the courses looked completely different when I was going through that sort of ladder process, if you like.
Oh, I remember a bit of that as well, don't worry.
Yeah. Well, I remember doing the old FA prelim with a guy called Jim Kelman, who was absolutely fantastic. And, Brendan Rodgers, who's at Leicester now, fondly remembers Jim as well and puts him up there as one of his favourite coaches. But being on a course with someone like Jim, and it wasn't so much Jim himself, it was the structure at the time, but it would have been things like you have to have your socks pulled up to sort of get a tick in a box, as it were. You had to sort of look and sound a certain way. And also, my point is, the practical delivery that you'd have had to have done, you would have had to have done that on course. So in essence, you're coaching other adults, which might look completely different in your world where you work. So the fact that in this sort of new regime, us as county coach developers or affiliate tutors would come out to you in your environment. So I suppose it eradicates a little bit of anxiety, but it's just true to you. It's where you're working. So that for me, I think is massive if you can do it in your own environment. For me personally, what do I look for? I'm always looking to gain knowledge. If I can learn even every day, if I can learn one thing a day, I'm happy with that. So it's got to be something, I suppose, that I'm sort of interested in, something that's going to advance me as a coach in this profession that I'm in. And I've been very fortunate in my sort of CPD, really. So prior to joining the Football Association, I'd been coaching for about 20 odd years, and I thought, I'm a sort of fully practiced coach, and I think I'm all right. And then coming to the Football Association, you realise, you know, that's just a small part. There's so much more to this coaching world. And I'm talking about things. If I look at CPD, I've done things like behaviour management, which is huge, is massive when we talk about coaching any sport. Things like early years care, knowing the differences, the sort of idiosyncrasies, if you like, between boys and girls and men and women in terms of brain development. I've even done things when I've worked in sort of kicks programs like hostage negotiation, just real sort of random stuff that I'm quietly interested in. That was fantastic. And then you got things that's probably a bit more poignant these days, like mental health first aid, and things like that. You know, mental health's a massive one for me. If anyone's listening to the podcast that we do, it's huge. It's huge. You know, it's like 1 in 3 of us probably now is the ratio that are sort of struggling or trying to live with some form of mental illness. So if you look at the courses that we go on to retain our sort of coaching license, if you like, one of those is a physical first aid award, which we'll sort of trip over ourselves and scramble to get on because they lapse every 3 years, but nothing said about mental health. And the reality is, you know, you're probably more likely to come across someone who has a mental health problem, experience mental health difficulties, or someone, let's say, that's suicidal, than someone who's having a heart attack. Statistics tell us that. So for me, there needs to be a place for the mental health side of things as well, and that's something that I'm really big on. So yeah, a long-winded answer, I suppose.
No, I think it's a great answer. I mean, that almost seamlessly, you can tell you've got a successful podcast yourself, because that links perfectly to our first podcast, which was related to mental health within primary schools and how important that is, and how it's something we've tried to incorporate in everything that we do as well. And I think that's really important. I think something else that I'll just pick up on your answer there that sort of goes along is that you have to have a sort of vested interest and a mindset to try and achieve that. And I think you're right in that maybe not informal, but the environment that suits you can be a really big part of that, because I think it's fair to say with a lot of the teachers that I've personally worked with, if you were to put them on not necessarily a football and FA course, but that sort of sport environment, which often is the only sort of real source of CPD, is very different to where they work. It's very different to the sort of things that they're used to, and that's a massive challenge towards getting people to take up that CPD, I think. So that's a really, really important point.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think somewhere along the line there's got to be something sort of intrinsic inside of you that says, you know what, I want to upskill myself and I want to learn more here, rather than sort of avoiding something because it's out of your sort of social engagement system. It's got to be something inside you that says, right, you know, I want to do that. That's going to add strings to my bow, or it's going to benefit the end user, you know, those players, those children in your care.
Yeah, definitely. I think intrinsically the majority of people who go into certainly the teaching, and I think coaching as well, you've got that drive to help the people you're with, and by extension you do that by helping yourself to develop. So hopefully that's always there. It's just how we as practitioners make that as accessible as possible, which sort of takes me on to the next question, really. So how do you see the environment around CPD and personal development changing? Because obviously there are going to be changes due to the elephant in the room, which is COVID-19. How do you see that going? What sort of changes can we as practitioners make, or as participants do, to make that easier, make that beneficial?
Yeah, it's going to be, I think the landscape's going to change somewhat. It's sort of been muted that the Football Association, we as a governing body, are going to go that way and look to do a few more things online. There's advantages and disadvantages with that. As a very much a kinesthetic learner myself, I'm someone who wants to be active and wants to be out and doing things. And I think we're always taught from sort of school age and everything to learn from sort of shoulders upwards, face the front and listen and do this and remember this. Yet you've got the people in the room that, if you're anything like me, you wanted to get up and run around and play as much sport as I could, that learn in a completely different way. So I think that's the way we're going. We can't hide from it. I think that the FA will probably experiment over the next couple of years with doing a few courses online. What that looks like, I don't know. I think, again, myself as a learner, I quite like the practical element. I like the physical element. I like being in a classroom environment. I like the social element, break times, lunch times, where I can perhaps come to you, Chris, and just say, well, can you give me an idea of what you guys are doing at the Community Trust in Reading? And just sort of magpie and steal some of your ideas. I think that's a real powerful and poignant exercise that we can't really avoid. There are spin-offs, of course. There's time factors. If you look at a lot of our courses, invariably they're done over weekends. We get the men and women whose teams are playing on a Saturday or Sunday, and they're on their phones at lunchtime checking in for the scores. And but I just think being on a course is just so powerful, and it's not so much us at the front of the room, us tutors with the England badge on, that are sort of saying this is how you should do it. It's other people. It's other people in that room. It can be so powerful. But let's see what the online offer looks like, and perhaps in time we can evaluate and have a look at both of them. But I think that's the way it's going to go, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, I think we do. The network is there. I think the positive side is we're not sort of starting from scratch, because we do understand that is true, that the interpersonal side is really important and communicating with people. There is an infrastructure there. So personally, I'm sure there's lots of people seeing this who are familiarised, but we've had a bit of a crash course in how to work remotely and how to communicate. So with a bit of luck, we can put a little bit of that into what I know we're doing at Reading. We're doing a lot of that. So we're trying to create as good an online community as we can with teachers, and obviously we're hoping and we're willing to be able to go and speak and work sort of one-to-one in person with people. But I think it's just about managing what sort of thing you're doing online and making sure that it is something valuable. I think we're probably all guilty. I know I'll hold my hands up openly and say, start a lockdown, got a bit of time, let's do a webinar. Let's do another webinar. Let's do an online course, I think on reflection, which I've also had time to do, how much benefit have I got from that? So I think that's, it's all there. It's just how we use it, how we be effective with that time.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And I wasn't too dissimilar to yourself, Chris. So at the start of lockdown, I've lost count of how many webinars and Zoom meetings and quizzes that I sort of signed up to. So I sort of threw myself in the first week, and then sort of fatigued out by the second or the third week. It was like, don't know if I could do many more of these. And then there's that period of reflection, which you mentioned, and then you look at something and go, right, this is a project I want to get into, but is there longevity in it? Is there sustainability in it? If so, maybe it's something that I can pursue a bit further, which is, what you're doing with these podcasts. We do the same with our podcast. But not only that, I think, as a nation, as a football fraternity, let's say, we've been really, really creative. And you can either, during this period, put your head under a rock and say, right, I'm not going to come up until all this appears, or you can fully immerse yourself in it and engage with as many people as you can, and that's what you guys have done. I like to think that I've done that, and the amount of connections that I've made during this time has been frightening. So you're talking about CPD. Well, sometimes it doesn't have to be along the formal route. It can be something that is less formal. So stuff online, just connecting with people, webinars, just something that's going to be of benefit to yourself.
Definitely. Cool. So a final one. a bit of a sort of multi-part question, but imagine yourself giving some advice to a practitioner, whether that be a teacher or a coach. I imagine your answer would be the same. When you're thinking about what CPD you're going to go and do, what advice would you give to that person? So, for example, oh no, go on.
It's a really good question, because I think when I first came into coaching with your community manager Dave Evans, I think I was sort of 17 at the time. Dave's a few years older than me, 23 I think he was at the time. I'd have been watching him for years, watch him coach for years, for a couple of years, and I remember one day he said to me, "Mark, you fancy doing the warm-up?" And all of this anxiety come over me, and I'd been watching him and trying to take on this stuff for a long time, and I said, "No, Dave, you sure? Just you do it." No, go on, crack on with it. So I scribbled down some notes and then off I went. So I think sometimes you've just got to immerse yourself and jump into something. And I was thinking then, you know, try and make it something that you're interested in. But I sort of rattled off a list earlier with things like behaviour management, early years, hostage negotiation, mental health, that kind of stuff. And when I first got into coaching, I don't think I'd have been interested in those sort of things. It would have been just football. I want to go and work in an academy, so I just want to go and watch some academy coaches. But I think in reality, those little sort of facets there are so important, so essential to your makeup as an individual. And I just think it's important. So whenever you're offered CPD or you're looking, just look outside. If you're a football coach and you want to go down that route like me, okay, there's your football, there's your main route, but what else? What else can sort of bolt onto that? If you look at the Premier League now, just think the mental health side and the player care side, that's just going to get bigger and bigger, particularly post-COVID. All of that kind of stuff, you know, what do we do when one of your learners, one of your players suddenly bursts into tears or they're experiencing difficulties at home? Our courses don't really train us for that. You know, we know how to put games on and a variety of different practices, but how do we deal with that side? How do we deal with one example? My son, when my son was 8, his mum was taking him to football, and because of the traffic he got there I think 15 minutes. All the coach saw was my little boy coming in late, not the picture of what happened prior to that. So kind of made an example out of my son in front of everyone else, which reduced him to tears as an 8-year-old, as it would do. Now my 8-year-old son can't drive. It's got nothing to do with him. It wasn't his fault, bless him, but he took the wrath. You know, so I suppose it's things like that. You know, the early years stuff that I mentioned before, if you can get a chance to do anything like that, it was amazing how different boys and girls' brains are at a certain age. You know, there was one of the early years teachers said to us, an example with the group of 5-year-olds was she'd asked the whole class, a mixture of boys and girls, to put their bags, put the chair on the table, put their bags on their shoulders and line up. So 3 fairly simple instructions, yet the first 4 to 5 people in the line were girls. So the girls had processed that information better, whether we like it or not. Girls and women will multitask better than us guys. So it's things like that to consider as well. There's there's a whole plethora of things. Sally Needham, if you ever get a chance to listen to Sally Needham, talks about the polyvagal theory and the social engagement system, which probably links into anxiety and fight, flight, and shutdown. And you know, you might be talking to a group of children, a group of players, and some are looking and fully engaged, and others might be looking up in the sky. They might just be out of their social engagement system, you know, which then boils down to you knowing them as an individual, as a person first, rather than treating them as footballers first. You know, so there's some really interesting courses out there. to go on. You know, behaviour management is something that I'm really into also. You know, the amount of the times that you'd have, we'd all have them in our sessions, someone who we would consider being somewhat disruptive. You know, and when I was growing up, it would be the sort of finger pointing and, you know, Chris, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. Now, there might be something in your makeup that actually quite likes that attention, and then you're getting that attention in the group. So there's got to be other ways, other little sort of subtle ways. If I come and stand next to you, Chris, without even saying anything, you would know that you've been rumbled, quite possibly. It's brilliant in it's brilliant in classrooms when you're tutoring as well, when one of the adults gets a mobile phone out. You haven't even got a point, you can just go and stand next to them and you'll see how quickly they put the phone away. So there's other ways. I think we owe it to the end user, we owe it to our players, we owe it to the children just to think a little bit differently about things. And I think this is where we're going to need some additional courses, some additional CPD events that go next to our whether it's academia, whether it's your teaching qualifications, whether it's your generic football qualifications. I think we need to have something aside from that also. Definitely.
I think it's some really great takeaways from that. So I think one thing that struck throughout that is it's got to be something that you're interested in. It doesn't necessarily have to, and also it doesn't necessarily have to be that specific. So if you want to develop, for example, your primary teaching PE, you don't have to go on a course for whichever sport you're doing. It might just be something that will help you manage the behaviour better, as that example. So it's just something not quite as obvious, which I think that's a really good way of looking at it, because you probably you'll find a course or something that you could learn a little bit about, and that'll help you across all sorts of areas, whether you're a coach, whether you're a teacher, whether you've been doing it for 6 months, whether you've been doing it for 25 years. I think that's a really good point, and probably some general good advice in there as well, actually.
Yeah, and I think you sort of alluded to it there. You know, there's lots of transferable skills in there. So if I've got a member of Reading FC's Community Trust coming in, I can either look at it and go, you know what, it's football, I'm not that interested in football, or look at the level of transferable skills that are involved. I can then relate to tennis, hockey, cricket, basketball, dance, gymnastics, whatever it is. In football, I'm going to be doing those same movements or very similar movements, the hopping, the dodging, the skipping, the running backwards, sprinting, walking, the observation skills. Everything's going to be linked in. You know, definitely. If you and I, Chris, had to go out tomorrow and coach, I don't know, something like a hockey session or a cricket session or a basketball session, then you could draw on your own experience from the football stuff that you do, and I'm sure that you could make it work. It's just the apparatus or the equipment that's going to look different, but you can draw on that. And also, sorry, go on. And also, I'm just really big on making things realistic and specific to the game, whatever that game is. So, you know, the amount of times as an 8-year-old I spent at school running around school fields as a warm-up, you know, to me that's time sort of wasted without a ball. You know, as I get older, sort of 11, 12, and my body starts changing, I'm really going to need to do a physical warm-up and start stretching the muscles. But before that, you know, we can really start concentrating on you know, the anaerobic side and the variety of those different movements. I think that's hugely important. So that planning process is huge as well.
No, for sure. No, well, I want to say really big thank you for that, because I think a lot of this whole conversation has probably opened the eyes for a few people who maybe have not had too much contact with the FA. I'm thinking about a lot of our teachers, and probably just to show that actually coaches are not that different from teachers in how we try to approach things, that there is a lot of transferability between the two professions, and they're very, very interlinked. And so I'm sure there's going to be a lot of interesting questions off the back of this. But also a really big general thank you, because there's some fantastic tips in there for anyone looking to do any sort of form of CPD, but particularly those with an interest in PE, in sport, or in football as well. So that's invaluable for us. So thank you very much for your time today, Mark. That's really, really appreciated.
No problem, Chris.
Thanks very much. We'll speak to you soon.
Thank you.